I am Elsie, 58 years old, and I spent 20 years as a restaurant consultant after my husband died. I raised 3 successful children alone, sacrificing everything for their future. When they invited me to my birthday dinner at the most exclusive restaurant in town, I was thrilled. But sometimes, the people you love the most can surprise you in the most unexpected ways. Before I tell you my story, let me know where you are watching from, hit that like and subscribe button. And tell me if you have ever been blindsided by family at what should have been a special occasion. After John died when I was 38, I found myself alone with 3 children and a mountain of debt. James was 16. Sophia was 14 and Tyler was only 10. John had been sick for years, and the medical bills had drained our savings. I remember sitting at our kitchen table the night after the funeral bills spread out before me, wondering how I would keep our family afloat. I had a degree in hospitality management, but had been a stay-at-home mom for over a decade. With no recent work experience, my prospects seemed bleak. But I had one thing going for me: I understood restaurants. My father had owned a small diner, and I had practically grown up in its kitchen. I knew the business inside and out. I started small, offering consulting services to struggling local restaurants. I would analyze their operations, menu pricing, and atmosphere, then provide practical solutions to increase profitability. My first client was a family-owned Italian restaurant on the verge of bankruptcy. 6 months after implementing my recommendations, they had doubled their revenue. Word spread, and soon I had more clients than I could handle. For 20 years, I worked 60 to 70 hours a week. I missed school plays and sports games. I worked holidays when restaurants needed extra help. I took calls at midnight when panicked owners faced crises. All so my children could have opportunities I never had. James was always the ambitious one. Serious and focused from a young age, he knew he wanted to be a lawyer by the time he was 12. I paid for SAT prep classes and hired tutors when he struggled with math. I worked an extra job to afford the application fees for prestigious universities. Now, at 36, he is a corporate lawyer at Wilson & Blackwell, one of the most prestigious firms in the country. He lives in a penthouse apartment and drives a car that costs more than my annual income. Sophia was always conscious of appearances. Beautiful and socially adept, she cultivated friendships with the right people from an early age. I scraped together money for the clothes and activities that would help her fit in with the wealthy kids at school. I wanted her to have the social connections I never had. She is now 34 and married to Richard, a hedge fund manager. They live in a gated community and vacation in places I can only see in magazines. Tyler, my youngest at 30, was always the creative one. He struggled in traditional school settings, but showed an early aptitude for computers. I took out a second mortgage on our modest home to pay for a specialized, tech-focused high school. That investment paid off when he launched his own software company 3 years ago. It recently received significant venture capital funding, turning my once struggling son into a millionaire almost overnight. I am immensely proud of their success. That was always the goal, wasn't it? For them to have better lives than I did. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Success changed them in ways I never anticipated. It started with small things. James commenting on my outdated clothes when I visited his office. Sophia rescheduling our lunch dates when her wealthier friends became available. Tyler explaining technology to me as if I were a child, despite the fact that I had managed complex restaurant systems for years. After I retired at 65, the distance grew. My phone calls went to voicemail more often. Invitations to family events came later and later, sometimes only days before, as if I were an afterthought. When I did attend, I often felt like an outsider, unable to contribute to conversations about luxury vacations and expensive hobbies. Despite having helped countless restaurant owners become wealthy, I lived modestly. My consulting fees had gone primarily to my children's education and opportunities, with little left for retirement. I own a small one-bedroom apartment and drive a 10-year-old car. I clip coupons and shop sales. After a lifetime of helping others succeed, I found myself comfortable but far from wealthy. Still, I never resented my choices. Seeing my children thrive was worth every sacrifice. At least that's what I told myself as the invitations grew scarcer and the phone calls shorter. When the text message came from James about a special birthday dinner for me at Le Chapeau, I was genuinely surprised. Le Chapeau was the most exclusive restaurant in the city, with a 3-month waiting list and prices that made my budget-conscious heart skip a beat. The text was followed by similar messages from Sophia and Tyler, all confirming the reservation for 7 o'clock on my birthday. "We want to do something special for you, Mom," James wrote. "Only the best for your birthday," added Sophia. "Looking forward to celebrating you," Tyler chimed in. I read those messages over and over, warmth spreading through my chest. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe they did still care, still valued our relationship despite our different lifestyles. I spent the next week preparing for the dinner. I withdrew $150 from my carefully managed savings account to buy a new blouse from a department store. It wasn't designer like Sophia's clothes, but it was the nicest I could afford, a deep blue silk that brought out my eyes. I made an appointment at a local salon to have my hair styled, something I hadn't done in months due to the expense. The stylist Anna listened patiently as I explained the occasion. "My children are taking me to Le Chapeau for my birthday," I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. "It's supposed to be amazing." "It is," Anna confirmed as she worked on my hair. "My boyfriend saved for 6 months to take me there for our anniversary. The food is incredible, but it's the experience that's really special. They make you feel like royalty." Royalty. I smiled at the thought. When was the last time I had felt special? When was the last time my children had truly seen me? I remembered birthdays from when they were younger, when we had so much less. Homemade cards and simple gifts that meant everything because of the thought behind them. The year after John died, when we could barely afford rent, the children had saved their allowances to buy me a cake. James, always the organizer, had orchestrated a surprise party with our neighbors. Sophia had picked wildflowers from the park to decorate our small dining table. Tyler had drawn a family portrait that I still kept framed on my bedside table. As I stood in my apartment the evening of the dinner, I looked at that drawing, now faded with age. The 4 stick figures held hands, smiling widely. "We love Mom," written in a child's uneven lettering across the top. I slipped on my new blouse and a pair of black pants that I had owned for years, but still looked nice. I added a simple gold necklace John had given me on our 10th anniversary, and the pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman who had lived a full life, whose face showed the lines of both laughter and worry, whose eyes still held hope. My apartment reflected the modest life I had built, small but comfortable, with furniture that was well worn, but clean walls decorated with family photos and mementos from a lifetime of experiences. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, but every item meaningful. This was my world, so different from the sleek modern homes my children now inhabited. I couldn't afford to drive to the restaurant and pay for parking in that area of town, so I called a taxi, another expense I rarely allowed myself. As we drove through increasingly upscale neighborhoods, I felt a flutter of anxiety in my stomach. Would I fit in at such an exclusive place? Would my children be embarrassed by my obvious lack of wealth? I pushed those thoughts away. This was my birthday celebration. My children had chosen this restaurant to honor me. I would enjoy every moment. The taxi pulled up outside Le Chapeau 15 minutes before 7. I had always believed in being punctual, a value I had tried to instill in my children. The restaurant's exterior was understated, but elegant, with a simple awning bearing the restaurant's name in gold script. Well-dressed patrons entered through glass doors, held open by uniformed staff. I paid the taxi driver, tipping him more than I should have in my happy anticipation, and approached the entrance. Taking a deep breath, I straightened my shoulders and walked inside, ready to be embraced by my successful children on my special day. The interior of Le Chapeau was even more impressive than I had imagined. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, casting a warm glow over tables dressed in crisp white linens. The walls were adorned with original artwork, and soft classical music played in the background. The air was filled with the tantalizing aromas of fine cuisine and the gentle murmur of conversation from the city's elite. I approached the hostess stand with confidence, despite feeling slightly underdressed compared to the designer labels clearly visible on other patrons. The hostess, a young woman with immaculate makeup and a perfectly tailored black dress, greeted me with a professional smile. "Good evening, welcome to Le Chapeau. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes," I replied warmly. "Under Lawson. It should be for 4 people at 7 o'clock." Her perfectly manicured fingers danced across the tablet in front of her, her brow furrowing slightly. "I'm sorry, madam, but I don't see a reservation under Lawson for this evening. Perhaps it's under one of my children's names: James Lawson, Sophia Cartwright, Tyler Lawson." With each name, she checked her tablet and shook her head apologetically. "I'm very sorry, but I don't see any of those names in our system for tonight." A knot began to form in my stomach. Had there been a mistake? A miscommunication? "Are you certain my children specifically told me 7 o'clock tonight? It's for my birthday dinner." As she began to apologize again, I glanced past her into the dining room. And that's when I saw them. James, Sophia, and Tyler all seated at a prime table near the window. They were already there, already seated with glasses of wine in front of them. A fourth person sat with them, a man in an expensive suit, whom I recognized as one of James's colleagues. For a moment, I stood frozen confusion washing over me. Then almost automatically, my feet began moving toward their table. As I approached, I noticed their animated conversation, the way they laughed, comfortably, clearly enjoying themselves. None of them noticed me until I was standing right beside them. "There you all are," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. "I was confused at the front. They didn't seem to have our reservation." The laughter died immediately. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me, widening in what looked unmistakably like shock. Not happiness, not welcome. Shock. "Mom," James said after an uncomfortable pause, "what are you doing here?" The question hit me like a physical blow. What was I doing here? I had been invited, hadn't I? "It's my birthday dinner," I said, my voice smaller now. "You all texted me about it." Sophia recovered first, her social training kicking in as she offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Mom, there seems to be a misunderstanding. We were planning to take you out this weekend, not tonight." But I had seen the texts. I wasn't confused about the date. I looked at Tyler, my youngest, always the most tender-hearted, hoping for some clarification, some warmth. But he wouldn't meet my eyes, staring instead at his water glass, as if it held the secrets of the universe. "I have the messages right here," I said, reaching for my phone. Before I could retrieve it, Sophia spoke again, her voice taking on the condescending tone she often used when explaining simple things to me. "You look nice, Mom, but honestly, maybe a cheaper place would be better for you. This isn't really your scene, is it?" Her words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. Around us, conversations continued, but I felt as though a spotlight had suddenly been cast on our table, illuminating this moment of humiliation for all to see. James cleared his throat, glancing nervously at his colleague. "Why don't we plan for another time when we're, less busy? I'll call you tomorrow." "Okay?" I stood there, purse clutched in suddenly trembling hands, as the truth dawned on me with brutal clarity. There had never been a reservation for me. The texts had been sent to pacify me, perhaps to prevent me from calling on my birthday and interrupting their actual plans. They had never intended for me to be here in this upscale restaurant, where my department store blouse and decade-old pants marked me as an outsider. I felt the eyes of nearby diners on me, curious, or perhaps pitying. The hostess hovered uncertainly in the background, clearly wondering if she should intervene. And my children, my 3 successful wealthy children for whom I had sacrificed everything, looked at me with a mixture of embarrassment and impatience, clearly wishing I would disappear. In that moment, something inside me that had been bending for years finally broke. The carefully maintained illusion that we were still a loving family, that their success hadn't fundamentally changed how they saw me, shattered like fine crystal dropped on marble flooring. I had been excluded from my own birthday dinner because I embarrassed them. I was an inconvenience, a reminder of their humble beginnings that they would rather forget. The truth was as devastating as it was undeniable. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, though it was likely only seconds. The initial shock gave way to a strange calmness, a clarity I hadn't expected. Instead of turning to leave as I could see they expected me to do, I straightened my shoulders. "I understand," I said simply, my voice steadier than I felt. "Enjoy your evening." I turned away from their table and walked not toward the exit, but toward the bar area of the restaurant. I needed a moment to collect myself to decide what to do next. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me flee in tears. The bar was elegant with backlit shelves, displaying rare spirits and fine wines. I took a seat on a plush bar stool, setting my purse carefully on the counter. The bartender approached, and I ordered the least expensive glass of wine on the menu, mentally calculating if I could afford both the drink and the taxi home. As I waited for my wine, I noticed a man emerging from what appeared to be a private dining room. He was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair, and an air of authority that suggested he was someone important. He spoke briefly to several staff members, his manner confident but kind. There was something vaguely familiar about him, though I couldn't place it. He was heading back toward the kitchen when his gaze swept across the bar area and landed on me. He paused, his brow furrowing slightly as if trying to place a half-remembered face. Then his eyes widened, and a broad, genuine smile spread across his face. "Elsie! Elsie Lawson!" he called out, changing direction to approach me. I blinked in surprise. "Yes, it is you." He reached the bar, his enthusiasm unmistakable. "I cannot believe it. After all these years." I stared at him, recognition slowly dawning. Marco Bellini. Yes, yes, my God. How long has it been? 15 years, 20. I confirmed, memories flooding back. Marco Bellini had been a struggling chef when I first met him. He had opened a small bistro that was failing, despite his extraordinary culinary talent. A mutual friend had connected us, and I had spent 6 months working with him to transform his business. We had redesigned the menu, reconfigured the dining space, retrained the staff, and completely overhauled the marketing strategy. "You saved my life, you know," he said, taking the bar stool next to mine. "Everything I have now started with your guidance." I looked around the opulent restaurant with new understanding. "This is yours, Le Chapeau." "Yes, and 2 others in the city, plus 1 in Chicago and another opening in San Francisco next year." He laughed, shaking his head in wonder. "And it all started with that tiny bistro and your brilliant ideas." The bartender returned with my wine, but Marco waved him away. No, this will not do. Anthony, bring a bottle of the 1982 Bordeaux to my private table immediately." He turned back to me. "You must join me. I insist." "Oh, I couldn't possibly." "Nonsense, I've been hoping to thank you properly for years. You disappeared after our project was complete. New phone number, new email." I tried to find you when Le Chapeau opened 5 years ago." He was right. After completing our work together, I had moved to be closer to James's university, changing my contact information in the process. By the time I returned to the city, Marco's original bistro had been sold, and I had assumed he had moved on to other ventures. I never connected the famous Le Chapeau with the struggling chef I had once known. "Please, you must let me thank you properly," Marco insisted. "Do you know that I still use your original concept for the menu structure? And the signature dish that put us on the culinary map was based on that recipe you shared from your grandmother." As he spoke, Marco stood and gestured for me to follow him. Almost in a daze, I collected my purse and walked with him through the restaurant. As we passed near my children's table, Marco's voice grew louder, his Italian accent becoming more pronounced as his excitement increased. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a special moment for Le Chapeau. This remarkable woman is the reason we exist." Heads turned throughout the restaurant. From the corner of my eye, I could see my children watching, confusion evident on their faces. Marco, oblivious to my family drama, continued to guide me toward a private table in an alcove typically reserved, as I would later learn, for celebrities and dignitaries. "Everyone, everyone," Marco called to his staff. "This is Elsie Lawson, the consultant who created our business model 20 years ago. Without her, there would be no Le Chapeau." The maitre d' pulled out my chair with a flourish, and Marco seated himself across from me, beaming with genuine pleasure. A sommelier appeared with the promised bottle of Bordeaux, presenting it with reverence before opening it. "To Elsie," Marco raised his glass once it was poured. "The most brilliant mind in the restaurant business, and the kindest heart I've ever known." As I raised my glass to meet his, I caught sight of my children's stunned expressions from across the room. For the first time that evening, I felt a smile, small but real, tug at my lips. Marco signaled to his staff, and within minutes, our table was filled with Le Chapeau's most exquisite offerings. Each dish was presented with theatrical flourish, the servers explaining the inspiration and preparation techniques. Many of the signature elements were based on concepts I had helped develop decades ago, now elevated to Michelin star quality. "This sauce," Marco explained, gesturing to a velvety reduction accompanying a perfectly seared scallop, "is still made using your technique of infusing the stock overnight. I have trained 100 chefs, and none have been able to improve upon your method." As we ate, Marco continued to share stories about his journey from struggling chef to acclaimed restaurateur. He spoke loudly enough that nearby tables could hear his enthusiasm drawing attention from throughout the dining room. I noticed other patrons watching with interest, clearly impressed by whatever connection I had to the famous owner. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marco suddenly stood, addressing the entire restaurant, "I want to introduce you to someone special. This is Elsie Lawson, the woman who made Le Chapeau possible." A murmur of interest spread through the dining room. Marco gestured to a server who quickly brought over a bottle of champagne. 20 years ago, I was a month away from bankruptcy. My food was good, but I knew nothing about running a business. Elsie spent 6 months transforming every aspect of my restaurant. The concepts she created then are the foundation of our success today. Let us toast to the true genius behind Le Chapeau. I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment and pride as diners around us raised their glasses. From the corner of my eye, I could see my children's table. Sophia was leaning over to whisper something to James, her expression a mixture of disbelief and mortification. Tyler was watching me directly, his face pale. After the toast, Marco insisted on bringing out a special dessert, not on the regular menu, a complex confection of chocolate and spice that he had created in my honor years ago, but that I had never tasted until now. As we enjoyed the dessert, I noticed Sophia rising from her seat and making her way toward our table. She approached with the practiced smile she used at her charity events, the one that never reached her eyes. "Mom, what a lovely surprise," she said, her voice honeyed but tight. "We had no idea you knew the owner." Before I could respond, Marco stood to greet her. "And you are Sophia Cartwright Elsie's daughter." She extended her hand using her married name, as she always did, in social situations where it carried more weight than Lawson. "Ah, you must be very proud of your mother," Marco said, shaking her hand briefly. "She is a legend in our industry." Sophia's smile faltered. "Yes, of course. Mom, perhaps you'd like to join us now?" "We were just discussing—" Marco interrupted smoothly. "I'm afraid I cannot spare Elsie just yet. We have 20 years to catch up on, and I have a vintage wine cellar to show her after dinner." He turned to me. "Unless you would prefer to join your family." I looked at Sophia, seeing the calculation in her eyes. She didn't want me at her table because she valued my company. She wanted access to the connection I apparently had with the famous owner of Le Chapeau. "I'm quite comfortable here, thank you," I said politely. "Please don't let me interrupt your business dinner." Sophia's smile tightened further, but she nodded and returned to her table. Moments later, I saw James stand and straighten his tie, clearly preparing to make his own approach. When he reached our table, he was all charm and corporate smoothness. "Mr. Bellini, what a pleasure. I'm James Lawson, Elsie's son." He extended his hand. "I had no idea my mother played such an important role in your success. There seems to have been a misunderstanding about our dinner arrangements tonight." "Was there?" Marco raised an eyebrow, looking between James and me. "Elsie didn't mention she was meeting family this evening." James cleared his throat. "Yes, well, there was a mix-up with the reservation. We were planning to celebrate Mom's birthday." "Is it your birthday?" Marco turned to me with genuine delight. "Why didn't you say so? This calls for more celebration." Before I could protest, Marco was signaling to his staff again. James stood awkwardly beside our table, clearly unsure whether to stay or return to his own party. The decision was made for him when Tyler approached his expression more sincere than his siblings. "Mom," he said softly, "can I talk to you for a minute? Privately?" Something in his tone made me agree. I excused myself to Marco and followed Tyler to a quiet corner near the restrooms. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said immediately, his voice low and strained. "This wasn't my idea, but I went along with it, and that's just as bad." "What wasn't your idea, Tyler?" He looked down, shame evident in his posture. "The dinner tonight. It was supposed to be with just James, Sophia, and me, plus James's potential client. James thought having you here might be, well..." "Might be what?" I pressed, though I already knew the answer. "He thought the client might not be impressed if they saw where we came from." Tyler admitted, the words rushing out now. Sophia agreed. "She said your clothes and the way you talk about coupons and sales would make us seem less sophisticated. They thought it would be better to take you somewhere else this weekend. Somewhere more appropriate for someone like me." I finished for him. Tyler nodded miserably. "I should have stood up to them. I'm sorry, Mom. Really sorry." As hurtful as his words were, I appreciated his honesty. Of my 3 children, Tyler had always been the most genuine. "Thank you for telling me the truth." I said, my voice steady, despite the pain squeezing my heart. As we returned to the main dining area, I noticed Marco had left our table and was speaking animatedly with several kitchen staff near the entrance to the kitchen. He caught my eye and gestured enthusiastically for me to join him. "Elsie, you must come meet my team. Many of them have heard me speak of you over the years." I followed him, aware that Tyler had returned to his siblings' table and that all 3 of my children were watching, as Marco led me through the swinging doors into Le Chapeau's immaculate kitchen. What happened next was completely unexpected. As we entered the entire kitchen, staff turned toward us and spontaneous applause broke out. Chefs, line cooks, pastry specialists, and dishwashers all stopped what they were doing to clap. Some even cheered. "Team," Marco announced proudly, "this is the Elsie I have told you all about. The woman whose ideas built the foundation for everything we do here. A tall chef in a spotless white jacket stepped forward. Your method for reducing food waste while maintaining inventory freshness is still the best I've ever encountered, he said, shaking my hand with reverence. Marco makes all new hires study your original systems before they can work here. Another chef chimed in. And your menu psychology concept's pure genius. We still use your framework for item placement and description. I was overwhelmed. For years, I had worked behind the scenes helping restaurant owners achieve success without recognition. I had never sought the spotlight, focusing instead on supporting my children. To suddenly receive such acknowledgement from industry professionals was both shocking and deeply moving. Through the kitchen's large observation windows that allowed dining guests to see into the culinary workspace, I could see my children's table. All three of them were watching the scene unfold, witnessing firsthand as I received the professional respect they had never known I deserved. After the kitchen tour, Marco escorted me back to our table where a birthday dessert awaited a delicate creation of sponge sugar and fresh berries with a single candle. The nearby tables joined in singing, "Happy Birthday," creating a moment of celebration I hadn't expected, but deeply appreciated. As the evening progressed, I made a decision. Instead of letting this night end in hurt and retreat, I would face my children directly. With Marco by my side offering moral support, I approached their table once more. "James, Sophia, Tyler," I said calmly. "I'd like to speak with you all for a moment." The business associate at their table looked interested in the unfolding drama, but excused himself tactfully to take a phone call. With just my children present, I took a deep breath and continued. "I know you didn't want me here tonight. I know you're embarrassed by me, by my clothes, by my modest lifestyle. What I don't understand is when that started to matter more than everything we've been through together." James shifted uncomfortably in his expensive suit. "Mom, you're making a scene. This isn't the place for a family discussion." "Where is the place, James? You've been avoiding my calls for months. When I do see you, you spend the entire time checking your phone or making excuses to leave early." "That's not fair," he protested but weakly. "I'm busy building a career." "A career I helped make possible," I reminded him. "Do you remember when you were applying to law schools? How we sat at the kitchen table night after night working on your applications? How I took an extra consulting job to pay for your LSAT prep course?" He had the grace to look ashamed. I turned to Sophia. "And you? I worked 3 jobs the year you were applying to colleges, so you could have the right clothes, the right accessories, to fit in with your wealthy friends. I wanted you to have the social connections I never had, but I never thought those connections would become more important to you than your own mother." Sophia looked down at her manicured nails. "You're exaggerating. We still see you on holidays." "When it's convenient," I corrected her. "And even then you spend the entire time checking your watch or making subtle comments about my apartment, my car, my life." Finally, I looked at Tyler. "You at least had the courage to tell me the truth tonight. But why did it take this level of humiliation? When did you all decide I wasn't good enough anymore?" Marco, who had been standing silently beside me, chose this moment to speak. "If I may," he said, his accented voice gentle but firm, "I have known your mother for only a fraction of the time you have yet. I recognize her extraordinary value. Do you know that the systems she created 20 years ago are still taught in culinary business schools? That restaurant owners across the country have built fortunes on her ideas?" The business associate had returned to the table in time to hear Marco's words. He looked at me with new interest. "Elsie Lawson, not the Elsie Lawson who revolutionized inventory management systems for mid-sized restaurants in the early 2000s. I turned to him surprised. "You know my work." "Know it? I studied it in my MBA program. Your case studies on turning around failing restaurants are legendary in certain circles. My children stared at this stranger who apparently knew more about my professional accomplishments than they did. Mom never talked about her work much, Tyler said quietly. We knew she was a consultant, but you never asked, I finished for him. You never showed interest in what I did, only in what I could provide. The business associate whose name I learned was Robert shook his head. If I had known I was dining with Elsie Lawson's family, I would have asked to meet you from the beginning. Your mother's work literally wrote the playbook for hospitality management in challenging economic environments. The power dynamic at the table had shifted completely. My children, who had been embarrassed by my presence earlier, now sat in uncomfortable silence as their business contact expressed admiration for the mother they had tried to hide away. Would you like to join us now, Mom? James asked, his voice, hopeful eyes darting between me and Robert. I looked at my 3 children, seeing clearly for the first time the distance that had grown between us. Not just physical distance or differences in lifestyle, but a fundamental disconnect in values. They had come to equate worth with wealth status, with character. No, thank you, I said simply. I'm enjoying my evening with Marco. Perhaps another time. As I turned to leave, I paused for one final thought. You know, all I ever wanted was for you to have opportunities I didn't have. I'm proud of your success, but I'm not ashamed of who I am or what I've accomplished. I hope someday you'll be able to say the same. I walked away, head held high, leaving my children sitting in silence. Marco guided me back to our table, where we continued our conversation about restaurants' life and second chances. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen and valued, not just as someone's mother, but as a person of accomplishment in my own right. The evening ended with Marco insisting on sending me home in his private car service. As we said goodbye, he pressed his business card into my hand. I mean it, Elsie. Call me. I have a proposition for you. I left Le Chapeau that night with mixed emotions, hurt by my children's rejection, but also strangely liberated. Something had shifted within me, a recognition of my own worth, independent of my children's approval. It was painful, yes, but also the beginning of something new. 6 months passed after that illuminating night at Le Chapeau. The morning after the restaurant incident, I woke up feeling both wounded and strangely empowered. My children's rejection had cut deep, exposing a truth I had been avoiding for years. They had outgrown not just their humble beginnings, but me as well. The first week was the hardest. I waited for phone calls that didn't come, checked my messages repeatedly, and cried myself to sleep more than once. I had given my children everything, and in return they had deemed me unworthy of their new, polished lives. But as days turned into weeks, something unexpected happened. Instead of collapsing under the weight of rejection, I began to rediscover pieces of myself that had been dormant for decades. I had spent so long defining myself as James, Sophia, and Tyler's mom that I had forgotten who Elsie Lawson was without that qualifier. 1 month after the incident, Tyler was the first to reach out. He came to my apartment unannounced, standing awkwardly at my door with a bouquet of flowers and genuine remorse in his eyes. I can't stop thinking about that night, he admitted as we sat in my small living room, about how we treated you, how I stood by and let it happen. Why did you? I asked, not accusingly, but genuinely curious. When did things change between us? Tyler thought for a long moment. I think it was gradual. When my company started taking off, suddenly, I was in rooms with people from completely different backgrounds. People with family connections, private school educations, vacation homes. I started feeling like an imposter, like someone would figure out I didn't belong. And I reminded you of where you came from, I said softly. He nodded, shame evident in his expression. But that night at Le Chapeau, seeing how Marco treated you, hearing about your professional reputation, I realized I've been ashamed of the wrong things. I should have been proud of you, of us, of how far we've come. Tyler's visit was the first step in a complicated healing process. We agreed to meet weekly for coffee, a simple ritual that gradually rebuilt our connection. During one of these meetings, he confessed that James and Sophia still felt embarrassed about what had happened, but were too proud to make amends. "They'll come around," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. I surprised myself with my response. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But for the first time, I'm not going to put my life on hold, waiting for my children to decide I'm worthy of their time. That statement marked a turning point in my recovery. Instead of desperately seeking reconciliation, I began setting boundaries. I stopped making myself available whenever they deigned to call. I declined invitations that felt like obligations, rather than genuine desires to spend time together. I started requiring respect as a condition of our relationship. 3 months after the restaurant incident, Sophia called. Unlike Tyler, her approach wasn't one of genuine remorse, but of reluctant acknowledgement that her behavior had been inappropriate. "I shouldn't have said what I did," she admitted during an awkward lunch, "about the cheaper restaurant." "No, you shouldn't have." I agreed, not rushing to ease her discomfort as I might have done in the past. "It's just, things are different now," she continued. "Richard and I move in certain circles. There are expectations." "There are always expectations, Sophia. The question is which ones matter to you." She didn't have an answer for that, but the conversation opened a door. Our relationship remained strained, but at least it was honest. I no longer pretended to be impressed by her materialistic values, and she made fewer comments about my modest lifestyle. James proved the most resistant to change. While he sent an expensive flower arrangement with a card saying, "Sorry about the misunderstanding," he made no effort to see me or discuss what had happened. His career continued to consume him, and I accepted that our relationship might never return to what it once was. Strangely, this acceptance brought peace rather than pain. I had spent decades centering my life around my children's needs and desires. Now, at 58, I was finally learning to prioritize my own. Marco's business card had sat on my kitchen counter for weeks before I finally called him. He answered immediately as if he'd been waiting for my call. "Elsie, I was beginning to think you had thrown my card away." "I needed some time," I explained. "Understandable, but now that you've called, let me tell you what I have in mind." Marco's proposition was unexpected but intriguing, a part-time consulting position with his restaurant group. He wanted me to evaluate his existing operations and mentor young managers, passing along the knowledge that had made Le Chapeau successful. "I'm not looking for charity," I told him firmly. He laughed. "Charity? Elsie, this is pure self-interest. Do you know how much I could charge other restaurant owners for access to your expertise? This is a business decision, not a favor." The salary he offered was generous, especially for part-time work. More importantly, the position would allow me to use skills I had honed over decades to be valued for my knowledge rather than tolerated for my relation to someone else. I accepted the position, and it became a lifeline during those months of family reconfiguration. 3 days a week, I visited different restaurants in Marco's growing empire, analyzing operations and mentoring staff. I felt useful again, respected for my own accomplishments, rather than just for what I had sacrificed for my children. Through this work, I met new people, developed friendships with colleagues, and built what felt like a chosen family. There was Maria, a brilliant chef with innovative ideas but limited business experience. Diego, a charismatic maitre d' who treated every guest like royalty. And Justine, a no-nonsense manager whose efficiency was matched only by her loyalty to her team. These new connections didn't replace my family, but they filled spaces in my life that had been empty for too long. We celebrated birthdays together, shared meals after work, and supported each other through challenges, both professional and personal. 4 months after the restaurant incident, I had my first honest conversation with all three of my children together. Tyler had organized the meeting, convinced that true healing required direct communication. We met at my apartment neutral territory that forced my older children to step into my world rather than expecting me to accommodate theirs. "I want us to talk about expectation, Pamon," I said once we were all seated in my modest living room, "about what family means to each of us." The conversation was difficult, with moments of defensiveness and old hurts resurfacing. James admitted that his drive for success had caused him to value status over sincerity. Sophia acknowledged that her focus on appearances had led her to lose sight of what truly mattered. Tyler, who had already begun his journey of reconciliation, spoke of his determination to balance his new life with respect for his roots. "I don't need designer clothes or expensive restaurants," I told them, "but I do need basic respect. I need to know that when we're together, it's because you want my company, not because you feel obligated. I need to be seen as a whole person, not just as your mother or an embarrassing reminder of where you came from." By the end of that evening, we had reached an understanding. Not perfect reconciliation, but a framework for moving forward with greater honesty and respect. James promised to make time for regular dinners, just the two of us, away from work and networking. Sophia suggested we take a cooking class together, an activity that would honor my expertise while creating new shared memories. Tyler invited me to tour his company and meet his team proudly, introducing me as the woman who had taught him everything he knew about business ethics. Now, 6 months after that painful night at Le Chapeau, I find myself in a place I never expected, content with my own company, fulfilled by meaningful work, and engaged in relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or history alone. My relationship with each of my children continues to evolve. Tyler and I have established a warm, honest connection that feels sustainable. Sophia and I are learning to appreciate our differences rather than allowing them to divide us. James remains the most distant, but even he has begun to show genuine interest in my life and work, recently asking for my advice on a business challenge he was facing. The most important lesson I've learned through this journey is that my worth was never dependent on my children's validation. For decades, I measured my success by their achievements, my value by their need for me. When that need diminished, I felt diminished as well. But that night at Le Chapeau, painful as it was, showed me that I had value beyond motherhood. My ideas, my expertise, my character were recognized and respected by others, even when my own children failed to see them. Now, as I prepare for another day of consulting work, I feel a sense of purpose and peace that comes from within, rather than from external validation. I still love my children deeply and cherish our improving relationships, but I no longer depend on them for my sense of self-worth. Life rarely follows the path we expect. Sometimes the most painful experiences lead to the most necessary growth. Being excluded from that dinner led me to a table where I was truly welcomed, truly valued. And for that unexpected blessing, I am genuinely grateful. Have you ever experienced rejection from those closest to you? How did you find your way back to self-worth? Share your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the most painful experiences can become our greatest teachers. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need this message today. Remember, your worth is never determined by others' perception of you. Thank you for listening, and may you always find a seat at the table where you are truly valued.